Okay, I'm going to walk through this 2017 FRQ. Sorry, I mislabeled it 2012 before I could stop it from going to print, but that's all right. Okay. A country is at full employment and produces two types of goods, consumer and capital goods. Draw correctly labeled graph of production possibility curve. So I know immediately I'm going to need to draw a PPC and then read on for the labels. Horizontal axis with consumer goods on the horizontal. So I'm going to do C for consumer good and capital goods on the vertical. I'm going to use K for capital goods. Indicate a point on your graph, label X, that represents full employment and a possible combination which both goods and services are being produced. So we know we have to make both of them, and we know that this line is going to represent all the potential GDP that an economy could make. So I'm going to label it point X, just like they asked. That's all they did. Label X, full employment, so we know that that is full employment, resource technology. That economy is happy, healthy, and functioning well. Okay, skip part B because we're not into the loanable funds market yet. And go to part C. On the same graph in part A, show another point labeled Z that represents full employment and a new combination of consumer goods and capital goods consistent with the increase in the country's national savings. Okay, so this right here, savings. Whenever you get paid, that's called your disposable income. And that is going to be two things. My income is going to equal consumption plus savings. Basically, in economics, whenever we get paid, we can do two things with it. We can spend it or we can put it in the bank. That is all. So when that happens, I put my money into savings accounts. And what's going to happen is that money goes into the banks, and that is what's called loanable funds. So if the loanable fund goes up, that means banks need your money. They want to loan it out, pay you 1% interest, and then charge 3% interest for it and make a profit. So that's what they like to do. So I know that if loanable funds increase, that means there's more of something. So if that increases, then the interest rate is going to drop. And what that's going to lead to is more investment. Because people invest at a lower interest rate, which means they borrow money at a lower interest rate. So we've seen this I before in sig X equals aggregate demand. So I know that at low interest rates, people want to borrow money and then purchase capital goods or things that they're going to need to create and sustain their businesses. So what's going to happen is when there's a low interest rate, we're going to move our economy and it will shift it more towards capital good production than consumer good production. We're still making consumer and capital goods. We're just going to make more capital goods. Remember, those are the buildings, tools, machines, and everything that we need in order to create new jobs, make economic growth. So on the same graph, show another point labeled Z. We did that. That represents full employment and new combination. So this is simply a new combination. We're still making all the things we could with resources, technology, and full employment. Everyone's working. Okay, referring to your answer in part C, will the long run aggregate supply shift right or shift to left or remain the same? And explain. So they don't ask you to draw it, but we could and we should, because this is unit 3.4, which we're doing today anyways. So this is long run aggregate supply curve right here. And at full employment, this long run aggregate supply, remember this is all the GDP we could make. If it started at 0 and increased to the right, and we wanted to make $20 trillion of GDP, this is what we do at full employment. We could do that same thing right here with $20 trillion, no matter what combination of goods and services we produce. So they're asking, would it shift to the right or left? Well, if we increase capital goods, and say we buy a new truck for our business, that truck's going to need a driver. And when we hire that new driver and pay them, that's going to create GDP that did not exist before. So economic growth would happen if we create more capital goods. So then, since we increase right and decrease left, we're going to increase this to the right because I know that it's going to shift based on this over here increasing. So this shift to the right, I'm going to label it long run aggregate supply 1, and then I'm going to have a new amount of GDP that we could make. So previously, we could only make this much GDP. With all the full employment resources and technology available. Now we can make this much GDP. So what they want as far as an answer goes is going to be for you to say the long run aggregate supply will shift to the right and explain that capital will increase. When we say that capital will increase, that is going to be how we show our economic growth.